Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sharon, and in today's video I'm going to be walking you through a case study presentation I did to land a job as a senior product designer. Now for this particular case study presentation, the instruction that I got from the recruiters was to focus on process. So the team really wanted to see what my design process was like, as well as how I collaborated with other team members and just really understand how I approached design related problems. So in this case study, you're going to see a lot of detail on the process on this very step-by-step and granular level. Now, this presentation and interview process was roughly 2 years ago. So 100% if I were to do this again, there's probably a couple of things that I would do differently or better, just based off of the fact that I have a bit more experience and I've gotten better as a designer over time. However, there is still a lot of really vital and valuable things that I think most designers can still apply in any of their upcoming interviews or case study presentations. So without wasting any more time, let's get into today's video. So first thing that we have is basically just the cover page, right? So on this page, of course, you can be much more creative than this and show a lot more detail or whatever it is you like. For me, I just wanted to, just introduce basically starting with like my name, my current role at the company that I was working at. So yeah, I kept it very basic and very simple. So I wanted to kind of break it down into chapters. Now, originally this presentation had 2 projects in it, but for the purpose of this video, I just shortened it to 1 project. So I wanted to get into about me and talk a little bit more about myself. So then I have like a picture. You should always try to use a picture that you like. At the time, I really liked this picture and I still use it a lot. And I just did a quick intro about myself, where I currently work, my background, which is mostly graphic design and print design, and how I transitioned, to front-end development and from there UX design. And I also gave a little bit of personal information about like hobbies and things that I was into at the time. And one thing I'll say about this is that when you're still doing this introduction, is a time for you to do, some quick bonding almost with the people that you're talking to. So you want to form some sort of relationship with them, maybe make some jokes, and also be very strategic about it. So if there are specific things that you think are part of your experience that could make you stand out or stand a better chance, I would say this is the best time to mention it. So if you have experience in something that your interviewers probably currently work with, this is a good time to mention that. So the next part of my introduction was just highlighting my experience. So this was not like all of my experience, but it was my most recent experience. So working in the past like 3 companies. After that, I wanted to highlight some of my skills and things that I felt like I was adept in, or things that I knew a lot about. So this is something that I think is really, really, really helpful, especially if you have specific tools and skills that you want to highlight. It really helps to focus on this. So I also went into a quick overview about my design process. This is something I actually learned also here on YouTube from a fellow designer. I believe her name is Femke, and I picked this from one of her YouTube videos. It was very helpful. So I just spoke a little bit about how, I like to go into a little bit of research, defining the problem, user journey mapping, exploring designs, as well as usability testing, and then handoff and monitoring, which is all very important in working with design teams. So then from there, I wanted to do like a, let's get talking about, projects. So like I mentioned, there were originally 2 in this presentation, but for this, I would just be showing 1 of those projects. And this was the project that I wanted to focus on. It was for a brand called EveryPlate at the company I was working with at the time, and it was the loyalty challenge. So I first of all started also by giving a quick intro into the brand, what it does, just to make people really understand everything the business was about and create that background understanding of the problem. I went into it a little bit deeper, give a little bit more context because some people are not familiar with this. So it's also very helpful to just give that added context that gives people some more knowledge about what you're talking about. Then I went into explaining more about like the problem, right? So our customers, what were they saying? I wanted to help them to understand that, there were surveys and there was feedback that we were getting, and gradually, highlight some of the issues that we were seeing. So we were saying things like, I don't see the point of, meal kits. For context, if you didn't already follow, EveryPlate is a meal kit planning service, so under the HelloFresh Group. And so we were seeing people saying things like, I don't understand the value, I don't feel rewarded for my loyalty. So for people that have ordered frequently or have ordered a lot. And then people, of course, asking how they can get access to like more discounts and basically rewards for their loyalty. And then I from there moved on to explaining about the how might we statements that we crafted based off of some of the problems or issues that our customers were raising frequently. And I first started with, the first one, talking about like how can we give customers something to look forward to, ensure our customers stay long enough to understand the value, keep our customers motivated and engaged on the platform, and also reward your customers consistently. So I think something I was really trying to do was to like progressively reveal information so that it was not just everything at the same time, which can be pretty overwhelming when you're going through a presentation. I went into talking about defining the projects, right? So the business team and the product team, we had several meetings, touch points, of course, pioneered by design and research. It's also really helpful to highlight what specific things you did. So I tried to, say that, okay, yes, I worked with the team, but there were certain things that I also led as well. So we decided to create a loyalty challenge for every plate to address some of the issues that we had previously gone through, right? Then I went into details about the project and the loyalty challenge and how specifically it was supposed to work. So it was for a duration of about 12 weeks, 8 boxes or meal orders, and 3 rewards throughout the duration of the 12 weeks and the 8 orders. And it's really important to highlight what your goals and focus areas are. And so that was the next thing that I wanted to do. And so I started off by defining like what our primary goals were. You can also use this to include maybe your metrics or KPIs. So at this point I was talking about like improving customer engagement and motivating loyalty, through the use of incentives. Also really important for you to highlight constraints and limitations if there are, because most teams are always going to have some level of constraints and limitations, and they want to see how you work as a designer with knowledge of that and how you maneuver that. So the first constraint at the time was that yes, there were 3 rewards, but technically it was just 1. And so we had to repeat that reward 3 times. And so I walked them through that process and how it was and why it was that way. It was mostly on the technical side. And also being aware of scalability, because like I mentioned, it's one of HelloFresh's brands, and HelloFresh does have other brands underneath it, which we might have had to duplicate that feature across different brands. And then did a quick intro about the team. I spoke about, the role of the product owner, the copywriter, the researcher, as well as the engineering manager who was managing a team of engineers that were working with us on this project. And then of course, myself. And then I wanted to also talk about the research aspect, because we started off with doing a bit more research to get more real context on the issue. So I didn't want to just phrase it like step 2, research. There's nothing wrong with that, but I wanted it to sound a bit more human and, to explain that we were trying to understand. So that's why I phrased it like empathizing through research. So I explained a little bit about why we were doing these interviews, the methodology at the time. It was also around COVID, so we spoke to about 10 active users as well via Zoom. And we had primary research questions that we were trying to answer. So we wanted to understand what type of rewards and loyalties or membership, what would be a good enough incentive. We wanted to understand like if they had preferences about how it would work. We also wanted to understand what would motivate them to be a part of the program and what would delight them during the experience. So from there, quickly moving into key results from the research and the takeaways. And that's something you always want to make sure is very clearly highlighted, is what did you learn? Research is only as good as what you take away from it. I highlighted that, of course, we were able to validate a hypothesis, which is that people were interested in the program. We're also able to understand that people wanted brand specific rewards, but also would have appreciated like food and stuff like that, as it was a food brand. So we also were able to validate that it would make people more likely to stay and increase engagement, which is what we suspected, and it might reduce the chances of people looking for something alternatively. So people are thinking, if I order a couple more boxes, then I can stay with them a couple more weeks and get this reward at the end of it. So really take the time to explain to whoever it is you're talking about, give as much context, or whoever it is you're talking to, give as much context and information so that they can really visualize and understand on a step-by-step basis what the project was about, and if there was research, what did the research tell you? And also, lastly, we learned that participants were interested but were concerned about anything that might, make them spend a longer amount of time that they were willing to. So then from there, I wanted us to get into our approach and our strategy, and how did we go from this research, into actually defining the entire scope of everything. So there was a team workshop led by one of my colleagues at the time who I collaborated with. And so at this point, I spoke a little bit about the workshop and what was done, the customer journey, talking about the different phases of the challenge and what the overall experience would be like. And then from there, we were able to set certain requirements based on the uniqueness of this project. So, we were talking about, we have to ensure, multiple entry points. We wanted to also take into account the constraints that I had mentioned early, to conceal the rewards because there were 3 and they were all the same. And so we wanted to build a sense of anticipation and not spoil it, because some people might feel, oh, if there's 3 rewards and I already know that they're exactly the same thing, it might get boring. So we wanted to kind of conceal it to create a higher level of anticipation, because some people might look at the rewards and be like, it's not worth it, and skip. Then we also wanted to ensure that it was clear that you could see what rewards you had not yet claimed and be able to easily take action. So getting started with the design. So of course I also spoke about, the process of like low fidelity designs and creating basic flows and using that to get feedback. I think it's also really important for designers, based on my experience, to highlight that they're getting feedback at early stages, because a lot of people have this issue where you wait till something's like very mature before you start getting feedback. That's something I also have struggled with in the past. And so it's important to highlight that you're getting feedback at every stage and carrying everyone along. So I also got to talk a little bit more about the high fidelity designs, right? I can't remember if I showed them around the Figma file or not, but in some cases that's not really a bad idea. It depends on the focus area, but I talked them through the different states, the achievements, how we were trying to portray that visually, and all of that. So then I wanted to show them a bit more zoomed in the design, and so I was talking to them about the onboarding and what that experience was like, the progress banner, the specific achievements page, and then I had also done like this animation which would show anytime you like accepted a reward, so it would like open up and like show these sparkly things, which is just an opportunity for us to create some delight, some fun. So after this, we went into discussing creating prototypes for feedback, as well as for some usability testing. And it's another thing to highlight: if you've worked with someone or have led usability testing efforts, this is something that you always want to highlight. So I embedded a GIF. By the way, this is a platform called pitch.com, but I do believe other platforms, you could use Figma, you could use Canva. They do support integrating GIFs. So I had a GIF which kind of showed them what the first time user onboarding was like. So the flow for people who had just been gotten into this loyalty challenge, right? So I walked them through that flow, and it was just looping on its own. So all I had to do was just explain as it goes. Human beings are very visual, so it helps to really highlight the visuals, not just by talking about it or showing screenshots, but if you can embed a video, it's very helpful. There was another later stages of the loyalty challenge, so I also wanted to highlight that and make it very clear that this was a further stage in what that experience looked like as a user would progress through the loyalty challenge. Then I also highlighted the web touchpoints, because while this was focused on the mobile app experience, there were also some web aspects to it, because this was also supposed to drive app adoption, because it was going to live primarily, in the mobile application. So that was something that I mentioned actually earlier, and because this is a video a couple of years later, I might have forgotten to mention that at the beginning. So after that, I wanted to also talk about the usability testing. So I went into a bit more detail about what exactly was done, how it went. So I spoke a little bit more about like the specific questions we were trying to ask and the methodology, as well as highlighting the specific recommendations that we got. So from there, we were able to get like some feedback, and so we made some iterations based off the feedback that we got from the usability testing. And then I wrapped it up with highlighting the results and the impact, which for the most part, you should always try to have the numbers, specific numbers. So this initiative actually did improve net revenue, order rate, as well as app adoption by 2.5%, 2.6%, and 14% respectively. So I think overall, a couple of things that's very important to remember when doing these case study presentations is to make use of your visual slides. Ensure you're carrying people along on a visual journey. Let people know what your thought process was at each point, and very important to let people know what you were specifically in charge of, and also let people know the points. It's very easy to go through a presentation and just be saying a lot of we did this and we did that. It's really important to say I did this and I led this and I led that. And just to reiterate on the first point about the visuals is if you can embed GIFs, some sort of indicators that show exactly what you did, it's very helpful. Also try to ensure that you are consistent with like your usage of fonts, your usage of colors, and your usage of design principles. And also don't shy away from talking a little bit about yourself and showing some personality in your introduction stage and while you're walking them through it. They don't expect you to have a perfect design process, because when you go through with the very perfect process and all of that, it kind of shows that your expectation from them, if they were to hire you, might not be as realistic. So feel free to explain certain rough patches or obstacles that you faced in the process of your project, and of course give some context as to how you were able to overcome it and how you were able to get past it. Of course, I ended the presentation with a thank you and appreciated everyone's time, and this is the part where you're open up for questions, so feel free to jump back into different pages and explain a little bit more what you did, give a bit more context. Yeah, speak with confidence as well, because it's your work, you know what you did, and nobody's gonna ask you anything that you didn't do. So speak with as much confidence and be sure of yourself and show a bit of character. So guys, I hope today's video was helpful. If it was, please do not forget to support me by liking, sharing, of course commenting, and subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much, and see you next time.